Darius didn't flinch. He stood there, eyes lowered, his gloved hands still holding the cleaning bucket. Behind him, the boardroom erupted in laughter. At the center of it all, Vanessa Hale, 32, CEO of one of the fastest-growing fintech companies in the country, smiling coldly. "That's what happens when people like you wander where they don't belong," she said, her tone sharp, almost rehearsed. The entire office paused. Phones lowered. Keyboard stilled. Darius simply nodded, bent down, picked up the broken mop, and walked out. What they didn't see, what no one cared to know, was that Darius once cradled that same woman in his arms, pulling her from a burning car 27 years ago. Back then, she was just a little girl, scared and bleeding. And he was the stranger who risked everything to save her. She never recognized him. He never reminded her. But now the world was about to. Because sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths, and the ones you step on today might just be the reason you're standing at all. What would you do if someone publicly humiliated you, but you held a secret that could change everything? Backhand index pointing down, tell us in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Darius's story, because this is just the beginning. Darius's days started before the city even remembered it had a heart. Every morning at 5:15 a.m., he laced up his cracked, steel-toe boots, the same pair he'd worn since his daughter left for college, and stepped out into the heavy air of another too-quiet dawn. The streets of Chicago were slick with old rain and yesterday's cigarette ash. Garbage trucks growled in the distance. Somewhere, a bakery turned on its ovens, but inside Hale Tech's towering headquarters, the silence was deeper. The front doors whispered open, and Darius entered like a ghost. No security guards greeted him. They rarely looked up from their screens. He didn't mind. He didn't need the acknowledgement. He had a job to do. He moved through the corridors with the muscle memory of a man who knew every inch of marble and tile better than the people who walked them in heels and loafers. His janitor's cart squeaked rhythmically, a kind of heartbeat. A bucket, a mop, a rag, 3 bottles of cleaner. One old, folded photo of a little girl tucked into the side panel, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Darius was 54. Strong in the back, slow in the knees. Black, quiet, invisible to most, but not to everyone. There were a few who nodded. Jesse from HR would sometimes leave him a coffee on Thursdays. Kevin from IT once asked about his grandkids. Darius didn't have any, but he appreciated the question. Mostly, though, he stayed in the background. That's where people seemed most comfortable having him. And yet he noticed everything. He noticed when a new intern tried to hide her tears in the women's bathroom after a tense call. He noticed the overworked security guard who fell asleep in his chair on the night shift, and how the supervisors whispered about firing him. He noticed Vanessa Hale the most, the CEO, 32, blonde, sharp cheekbones, designer suits, a voice like static, smooth until it wasn't. She walked like she was late to a war she planned to win, and no one dared slow her down. People said she'd taken over Hale Tech from her father after his stroke, doubled its valuation, and built a reputation for being ruthless, brilliant, and cold. To Darius, she was something else entirely, a walking contradiction. Ice on the outside, fire under pressure, and yet a familiar sadness in her eyes when no one was watching. They'd never really spoken. Just a few quick watch where you're going S or this needs cleaning remarks in passing. She didn't know his name, didn't look long enough to learn it. But Darius had watched her grow into her power like someone watching a storm gather in the distance. Still, he respected the place. He did his work with pride, because dignity wasn't about the job you had. It was about how you did it. In the evenings, Darius returned to a small 2-bedroom apartment in Bronzeville. The walls were decorated with old jazz posters and a single photo of him and his daughter, Layla, on her graduation day. She lived in Atlanta now, working in public health. Called once a week. Missed him more than she let on. Dinner was simple, beans and rice, maybe a fried egg if he wasn't too tired. Sometimes he fell asleep watching reruns of Good Times, the TV still humming as the city hummed louder. No, one knew that he used to be a paramedic, That once he ran into burning buildings for a living, that he'd held people's hands as they died, whispered lies like, "You're going to be okay," because sometimes lies were the kindest thing. No one knew he'd saved a little girl once, pulled her out of a smoking car after a crash on the I-55. Her mother hadn't made it. That girl had a bracelet with her name on it, Vanessa. He remembered the way she clung to him, not wanting to let go even after the ambulance came. She was 7, traumatized, eyes wide and searching. He never forgot her. He never knew what happened to her after. Not until he saw her walk into Hale Tech for the first time, years later, wearing a sharp navy suit and carrying her father's last name like a sword. She didn't recognize him, but he knew. One morning, a subtle shift arrived. It started small. Vanessa stopped near the break room and glanced at Darius mopping a spill. Her gaze lingered half a second longer than usual. No words, just a flicker of something: memory, discomfort, and then she was gone. The next day, she called for a cleanup on the executive floor. Not the usual assistant. Darius arrived to find nothing but a tipped-over plant. He cleaned in silence. She didn't acknowledge him, but she didn't leave either. She stood by the window, arms crossed, staring at the skyline like it had offended her. "You ever get tired of the city?" she asked, suddenly, voice distant. Darius paused. "Sometimes," he said, wringing out the mop, "but it's home." She didn't respond, just nodded slightly, then left the room like she'd said too much. That night, Darius couldn't sleep. Her voice echoed in his head. He didn't know why. He just felt something shifting, like two stories finally brushing against each other after years apart. Back in the office, things started to change. Not for the better. A round of layoffs was announced. Lower-level staff, custodians, front desk people, the ones with the smallest paychecks and the biggest responsibilities. There was talk of optimization, outsourcing, and efficiency metrics. Darius's name came up. He didn't have tenure, didn't make waves, made just enough to survive. But he also had something they didn't: a memory, a secret, and a choice. The shift happened on a Tuesday. Darius was cleaning the glass conference room, floor-to-ceiling windows, 12 leather chairs, untouched pastries on the table. The board was meeting. Vanessa walked in mid-discussion, sharp as ever. The room quieted. "I want this place spotless before the investors arrive," she said without turning. "And can someone tell him to wait outside next time?" Laughter rippled. Darius stood in the doorway, holding his mop like a question. Something in him cracked, but he didn't say a word. Not yet. He turned, left, and outside the glass, he caught Vanessa staring at him. A flicker of confusion in her expression, almost like she was trying to remember something long buried. That moment didn't break him. It prepared him, because some people carry their power in volume, others in silence. And Darius was done being quiet. It started with a list. An email quietly circulated among department heads with the subject line, "Phase 1 reduction." There was no fanfare, no announcement, no town hall. Just an Excel spreadsheet. Neatly formatted rows of names, employee IDs, and one-word justifications. Low impact. Outsourceable. Non-critical. Darius's name was there. Row 14. No warning. No meeting. No conversation. Just a spreadsheet that decided his worth. He found out not from HR, but from a whisper in the break room. "Hey, did you hear? They're letting some of the maintenance team go." One of the younger analysts said, biting into a blueberry muffin. "Budget stuff. I think that older guy, what's his name? The quiet one, is on the list." The other replied, mouth half full, "Oh, him? I thought he was already like a contractor or something." They never even said his name. That afternoon, Darius continued his shift as usual. He wiped fingerprints off the elevator buttons, replaced paper towels in the restroom, and fixed a broken chair on the 3rd floor. But something inside him had shifted, like a door creaked open in a hallway he thought was long closed. And then it happened. He was in the executive corridor, gathering trash from the private offices when Vanessa Hale passed by. Her heels clicked sharply on the floor. She glanced at him, then stopped. "You missed something," she said flatly, pointing to a single wrapper under a desk. Darius bent to pick it up, but she wasn't done. Next time, try not to cut corners. Some of us work hard to keep this place looking respectable." She said it loud enough for two interns nearby to hear. They chuckled softly. Darius looked up, not with defiance, but with quiet clarity. "I do my best every day," he said steady, "even when no one's watching." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. She didn't respond, just turned and walked away. But that moment, those 10 seconds, lit a fuse. That night, Darius sat in his apartment, lights off, phone off, just him and the hum of the fridge. He thought of Layla, her laugh, her drive, how proud she was of him, how she called every Sunday and asked, "You still teaching those young folks how to keep things clean, Daddy?" What would she say if she knew her father, the man who raised her on a custodian salary, who packed her lunches in foil, who walked her to school, even after night shifts, was being pushed out like trash? He picked up the photo on his nightstand, the one from graduation. Her in a blue cap and gown grinning. Him in his best shirt, holding back tears. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was tired. Tired of being stepped over. Tired of being a ghost in rooms he kept clean. Tired of pretending that silence was strength. The next day he arrived early. Earlier than usual. The sun hadn't broken yet. And taped to the maintenance closet was a letter. Position review. Janitorial redundancy, effective 2 weeks. No signature. No conversation. Just facts. He read it 3 times. Folded it once. Slipped it into his jacket pocket and went to work. Word spread fast. Jesse from HR gave him a long hug and whispered, "I tried to stop it." Kevin from IT bought him lunch and said, "Man, this ain't right." Even the night guard, old Benny, shook his head and muttered, "Corporate always trims from the roots." But Darius didn't say much. Until Friday. That's when he saw the replacement. A cleaning crew. Uniformed. Outsourced. Cheap. Young. Loud. Rushed. They didn't mop corners. They didn't refill soap. They didn't care. And Vanessa Hale? She didn't even blink. That afternoon she passed him again. "Still here?" she asked, not unkindly. "Thought you'd be packing up by now." "I finish what I start," Darius replied, calm as ever. She hesitated just a beat, like she heard something in his voice that unsettled her, like a bell tolling in the distance. She looked at him longer this time. Something flickered in her face. Confusion? Recognition? But she said nothing, just turned and left. Again, that night, Darius opened the old shoebox under his bed. Inside were newspaper clippings. Local man pulls girl from burning car on I-55. Unidentified hero saves child after tragic crash. A photo of a young paramedic holding a child, both faces blurred. And the bracelet, still melted slightly from the heat. Vanessa. He hadn't meant to hold on to it this long. It was supposed to be evidence. Then a memory. Then a secret. Now it was a question. What would she say if she knew? What would the world say? He closed the box. The next day was Saturday. He wasn't scheduled to work. But he went in anyway. He had something to return. Not revenge. Not anger. Just truth. He walked into the building, past the weekend guard, through the quiet halls. His keycard still worked. Up to the 19th floor. Vanessa's office. He knocked once. Nothing. He opened the door. She was there alone, headphones on, reviewing quarterly reports. She looked up, startled. "Darius? You shouldn't." He placed the bracelet on her desk. Gently, deliberately. "I think this belongs to you." She stared at it, then at him, then back at it. He waited. Silence hung in the air like a held breath. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. Her eyes widened. "No, this can't be." He nodded. "I was there. You don't remember. That's okay. I did." She sat down slowly, bracelet in hand, like the room had tilted sideways. Darius turned to leave. Before he closed the door, he said, "We're all more than what we do. Even janitors." And then he was gone. The next Monday felt different. Everyone in the building felt it, even if they didn't know why. Vanessa Hale sat in her corner office longer than usual, blinds drawn. The bracelet Darius had returned never left her desk. She didn't wear it, didn't hide it either. It just sat there, small and silent, like a question no one wanted to ask. The staff noticed she was quieter, less sharp, distracted. She kept opening tabs, then closing them, running her hand across her jaw, pausing in the middle of sentences. Her voice still carried weight, but her silence now carried more. Meanwhile, Darius showed up like always. Uniform crisp, back straight, but people looked at him differently now. Whispers followed him down the hallway. "You heard what he did?" "I heard she didn't fire him." "Wait, wasn't he supposed to be laid off?" Rumors swirled. No one knew the full story, but everyone knew something had shifted. Jessie from HR cornered him near the stairwell. "Darius," she whispered, eyes darting around. "What did you say to her?" "I just told her the truth." Jessie nodded slowly. "Well, she's not the same. And neither are you." That week, something rare happened. Vanessa called off the outsourcing contract. Quietly. No emails. Just a phone call. One of the cleaning crew left early, confused. Another never showed up again. Darius wasn't reinstated officially, but no one said anything when he kept working. Then came the elevator moment. Darius stepped into the executive lift, normally off-limits, to clean a spill. The doors began to close, but a manicured hand stopped them. Vanessa stepped in. Just the two of them. The air was tense. Not hostile, just heavy with unsaid things. She glanced at him, opened her mouth, closed it. "I remember the car," she said finally, voice low. "The smell of gas. The glass. My mother screaming." Darius said nothing. "I had dreams about it for years. A man's voice, telling me, 'You're okay now.' I never saw his face." Darius looked straight ahead. "You didn't need to." Silence again. When the doors opened, she didn't move at first. Then, she said, almost a whisper, "Why didn't you tell me?" He turned to her, eyes tired but clear. "Because it was never about being seen. It was about keeping you alive." She didn't reply, just walked out. But that night, the entire building felt like it exhaled. But the system, the bigger system, didn't like loose ends. A senior board member caught wind of Vanessa's hesitation on layoffs. He sent her an email titled, "Leadership is not sentiment." Another exec casually dropped, "You're letting a janitor affect company morale?" Whispers turned to questions. Questions turned to pressure. And pressure? It builds fast when you're already close to breaking. Friday morning. Rain pounded the windows. Vanessa called a mandatory leadership meeting. Darius wasn't there, but he was on every slide. Employee morale. Respect culture. Unnecessary costs. The head of finance, Gerald, tapped his pen. "With all due respect, Vanessa, you've built a reputation on decisiveness. This man, no matter how inspiring his story, is a custodian." Vanessa stared at him, unreadable. "I know who he is," she said. "He was set for termination," Gerald pushed. "Now he's back? Unofficially? This sets a dangerous precedent." Vanessa didn't answer. But her silence, again, was louder than anything in that room. That night, Darius found an envelope on his locker. Final notice, termination effective immediately. And signed. Cowardly. He held it for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not out of bitterness. Out of clarity. Because truth, real truth, had already done what it was supposed to. And that made some people very, very uncomfortable. Back at home, he called Layla. She picked up immediately. "Hey, Daddy, everything okay?" He paused. "Yeah, but I might be done working." A pause on the line. "Fired. They tried." "You okay?" "I'm more than okay." And for the first time in a long time, he meant it. But Vanessa wasn't okay. She stayed late that night, alone in her office, staring at the bracelet. Then she pulled up the old news archives, typed, "Child rescued in I-55 car crash, 1998. The photo loaded. Blurry, but clear enough. The man's face, soot-stained, holding a terrified little girl wrapped in a silver blanket. She covered her mouth. A sob escaped before she could stop it. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She cried. That weekend, Vanessa disappeared. No one saw her enter the building. No one saw her leave. She didn't respond to emails, texts, or calendar invites. For the first time since taking over Hale Tech, she went silent. The kind of silence that unnerved her assistant puzzled the board and made the rest of the staff whisper louder. Rumors flew. Is she sick? Did she quit? Did something happen with that janitor guy? In a company obsessed with speed and certainty, her absence was a void that no spreadsheet could fill. Darius spent that same weekend differently. He sat on his porch, listened to the wind move through the trees like it had something to say, read an old book of Baldwin essays, took slow walks around the neighborhood where he raised Layla, where people still remembered his name. He had peace, but inside something still gnawed. Not anger, not regret, just the feeling that the story wasn't done yet. Monday came. Vanessa walked into Hale Tech just before 9 a.m. No security detail, no sunglasses, no pretense. She walked straight to her office and locked the door. Her assistant, Olivia, knocked. Board's asking for an update, she said through the glass. Everyone's on edge. Vanessa didn't answer. Instead, she sat at her desk and opened a blank document. Typed, "What makes someone worthy of respect?" Then deleted it. Typed, "What happens when we mistake power for value?" Deleted again. She leaned back in her chair and stared at the bracelet. It looked so small now. Meanwhile, the board grew restless. Another memo was drafted, this one with stronger language. CEO's emotional disengagement impacting leadership clarity. Gerald, the finance head, had already begun whispering about an emergency vote of no confidence. They needed her sharp. They needed her cold. They needed her to be the woman they could control. Vanessa finally emerged late that afternoon. She walked directly to the maintenance floor. It took people a moment to even recognize her. She'd never been down there. But Darius wasn't there. She stood by his locker, hand hovering over the nameplate. Then she took out a folded piece of paper, slid it through the crack in the door. Darius found it the next morning. It read, "I remember now, and I'm sorry, but not just for what I said, for forgetting what matters. I need to talk. Please, V." He stared at it for a long time, folded it, placed it inside his chest pocket, right where his old paramedic patch used to sit. He didn't go to her office. Not yet. That afternoon, he walked past the boardroom. The door was cracked. He heard his name. He's a liability. This entire story could go viral, someone hissed. Another, she's compromised. This isn't about gratitude anymore. It's about optics. He stopped walking. Something inside him clenched. That night, Darius sat on the bus ride home. Same route, same seat. But his mind wasn't on routine. It was back in 1998. The crash, the scream, the child shaking in his arms, the smell of gasoline and blood, and the promise he made when no one was listening. You're safe now. He kept that promise for 27 years. But maybe now it was time to speak. The next morning, Vanessa held a staff-wide meeting. Mandatory. No slides. No notes. Just her in a plain black blouse, hair tied back, standing at the front of the 12th floor atrium. People stood packed shoulder to shoulder, confused, curious, waiting. She cleared her throat. "I've made a lot of decisions since becoming CEO of Hale Tech," she began. Some smart, some necessary, some cold. She scanned the crowd. "But last week, I almost made a decision that would have cost us something deeper than dollars." She paused, took a breath. "There's a man who works here. You've passed him in the halls. Maybe you've ignored him. Maybe you've laughed when others did. I know I have." Murmurs spread. She continued. "His name is Darius Cole, and he's more than a janitor. He's the reason I'm alive." Silence. "I didn't know until last week. I didn't remember until I saw something he returned to me. A bracelet I was wearing when my mother died in a car crash. I was pulled from the wreck by a stranger. That stranger was him." Gasps. Audible. Real. Vanessa's voice cracked, just once. "I treated him like he didn't matter. And I was wrong." She looked directly into the crowd. And so was this company. Darius was in the back, watching, not with pride, with pain. Because even when the truth comes out, it still hurts to hear it spoken too late. But he nodded slowly. After the meeting, he stood outside the building. The air was sharp, the wind cold, but his chest was light. That's when Vanessa appeared beside him. No security, no assistance, just her. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in decades. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, "but I needed to say it." He nodded once. "You did." A beat of silence. "I'm stepping back," she added, "temporarily. I'm not well. Not in the ways I thought I was." Darius didn't respond right away. Then he said, "It's okay to fall apart, as long as you rebuild better." She looked at him like those words mattered more than anything the board ever told her. The media got the story first, not from a press release, not from PR, but from a leak. Someone on the board, maybe Gerald, maybe someone else who wanted leverage, sent the internal memo and photos to a friend at the Tribune. By morning, it was everywhere. CEO owes her life to fired janitor. Underneath the headline, a grainy black and white photo of a car crash from 1998. A firefighter, a child wrapped in a foil blanket, a man, face turned slightly away, kneeling beside her. And next to it, a recent photo. Darius Cole, janitor at Hale Tech, stepping out of the building, head high, shoulders straight. It went viral in hours. Social media lit up. This man saved her life, and they fired him. Power always forgets, but people remember. He's a better leader than most execs I've met. Hashtag Justice for Darius started trending. So did hashtag Hail Hypocrisy. At first, Vanessa said nothing. She canceled her meetings, stayed inside, let the world spin without trying to spin it herself. She read every comment, every headline. She sat on the floor of her office, no makeup, no heels, just her and the truth. For the first time in her career, she didn't try to control the narrative. She let it hurt, let it open something inside her she hadn't touched in years. But Darius? He didn't hide. He stood in front of his building, answered every reporter with calm. "I didn't do what I did to be thanked," he said. "I did it because it was right. But don't you think it's unfair how you were treated?" A reporter pushed. Darius looked at him, tired but steady. Fairness isn't guaranteed. But truth? It always shows up eventually. The fallout was immediate. The board called an emergency meeting. Gerald was furious. "She's compromised our credibility." Others were scared. "We need to issue a statement." But one member, older, quiet, finally spoke up. "You all keep talking about optics. But has anyone asked if maybe she's just doing what we should have done a long time ago?" The room went still. Vanessa made her first public move the next morning. She called a press conference. No podium, no script, just a room full of people, cameras rolling. "I was rescued when I was 7 years old," she began, "and I forgot. I buried it. I built a career, a life on control and ambition. And in the process, I forgot the man who gave me my second chance." She looked into the crowd. He worked in this building, cleaned our messes, watched us walk past him like he didn't exist. A beat. "I made decisions based on numbers, layoffs, cuts, cold strategy. And one of those decisions almost erased the man who once saved me." She took a breath. "I was wrong, and I am responsible." The next moment broke the internet, because out of the corner of the room, Darius stood up. No one expected it, not even her. He walked to the front, quiet, composed. Vanessa stepped back. He didn't take the mic, just looked at her, and said, "You remembered." She nodded, eyes glassy. "I'll never forget again," she said. Then, softly, "Thank you." He extended his hand. She took it, and the photo of that handshake, a janitor and a CEO, power equalized, became the image seen across the world. Within 24 hours, everything changed. Vanessa reinstated Darius formally, not as janitor, but as head of employee integrity and culture. She created a role just for him. He didn't accept it immediately. "I clean things," he said. She smiled. "Then help us clean this place the right way." But the revelation went further. Other employees began to speak up about the casual disrespect. The class divides. The way titles dictated humanity. A mailroom clerk posted about Darius fixing the vending machine on his day off, just because someone needed it. A security guard shared how Darius once brought him soup when he was sick. The stories kept coming. Darius hadn't just saved Vanessa. He'd been saving this place for years. They were just too busy looking up to see it. 1 week later, the board held a vote. Not to remove Vanessa, but to reform Hale Tech from the inside out. They brought in consultants to assess culture, created a cross-level ethics council with Darius as co-chair. For the first time in its history, Hale Tech was listening to the people it used to ignore. And as for Darius, he didn't want glory. He just wanted honesty. One afternoon, Layla called him. "I saw the video," she said. "Yeah. You look good up there, Daddy." He laughed softly. "I was scared." "You didn't look it. I was just telling the truth." Layla paused. "You've always told the truth. People just finally heard you." And somewhere deep inside Hale Tech's walls, the mop closet stayed empty. Not because Darius wasn't working, but because he was now walking through every floor, talking to everyone, from intern to executive. Listening, remembering, teaching people what respect really looked like. Systems don't change overnight. And power? It never leaves quietly. While the public praised Hale Tech's transformation, hailed Vanessa's honesty, celebrated Darius's dignity, inside the building, resistance simmered. Not everyone was ready to follow a janitor, no matter how heroic. Some whispered that it was just for show. Others said it was dangerous. And Gerald? He was far from finished. The week after Darius was appointed co-chair of the Ethics and Culture Council, someone stole his ID badge. The new one took 3 days to process. 3 days where he couldn't access half the floors he was supposed to be leading. An accident? Maybe. Then came the IT glitch. His email was suddenly disabled for security reasons. Another mistake? Then a memo surfaced and signed, claiming that Darius's new role had no legal authority. It was clear. Someone, somewhere, wanted him out again. But this time he wasn't alone. Vanessa noticed first. She walked into the boardroom mid-conversation and heard Gerald mutter, "Charity cases don't belong in leadership." She stopped cold. "Say that again." The room went still. Gerald smirked. "You heard me." Vanessa didn't raise her voice. But what she said next froze everyone. Darius Cole is more qualified to lead this company's culture than half of us are to lead anything. And if you think this is just about PR, then maybe it's time we talk about your cultural contributions. Gerald's face darkened. But for the first time, he stayed silent. Outside the boardroom, the real work continued. Darius walked the halls, listened to complaints, quietly mediated conflicts, created a suggestion box, old school, wooden, handwritten sign on top. Say what needs saying. And people did. Anonymous notes filled the box daily. Why do we only promote Ivy grads? Why does security check the black interns twice? Why don't we have mental health support staff? Darius read them all, sorted them into categories, built patterns, turned pain into policy proposals. It was slow, messy, human, but it was real. Still, the resistance fought back. Gerald arranged for a performance review of Darius's role. Said it was standard practice. Vanessa called his bluff. Sat in on the meeting herself. They tried to rattle Darius with questions. Do you have a background in leadership consulting? What qualifies you to assess executive culture? He answered, calm and grounded. I've watched how this place treats people. For 15 years. I don't have theories. I have witness. The room fell silent. Vanessa spoke next. And that's why he's here. After that, Gerald stopped pushing publicly. But Darius knew the system would never stop entirely. It would just shift tactics. That's why he kept everything transparent. Weekly staff forums, open door hours, culture reports published in full to the entire company. No secrets, no spin, just truth written clearly and signed with his full name. Still, it wasn't easy. One night, Darius sat alone at his desk, sorting through 30 handwritten grievances. His hands trembled, not from fear, from the weight. He wasn't just holding paper. He was holding people's quiet pain, their unseen moments, their small, daily humiliations, and it wore on him, until there was a knock. Vanessa stood at the door, no clipboard, no command. She simply asked, "You eaten?" He hadn't. She brought takeout, sat with him, said nothing for a full 10 minutes. Then, "You're doing more good here than I ever did in the first 5 years. He shook his head. "You took a risk. You let the light in." She smiled. "No, you were the light. I just stopped pretending it didn't exist." The next morning, something extraordinary happened. A custodian, Marta, was promoted to floor supervisor. Not because of a viral story, because of merit, because someone finally saw her. Darius shook her hand, said, "You earned this." She cried. The HR rep cried. Even Kevin from IT teared up. It was a small moment. But inside a building that used to reward only profit, it meant everything. The resistance still lingered. An anonymous op-ed surfaced in a business journal. "Sentiment doesn't build empires. Why Hale Tech is heading for a soft collapse." It didn't name Darius, but it didn't have to. He read it once, then printed it, taped it to the break room bulletin board, wrote underneath it, "Let's prove them wrong. Together." No memo, no retaliation, just courage. By the end of the quarter, employee engagement had risen by 19%. Retention was up, complaints were down. But more than numbers, something else had changed. People looked each other in the eye again. People greeted Darius with handshakes, not nods. Vanessa stopped walking with her head down. And the mop closet? It stayed clean. Because Darius's impact wasn't in what he carried. It was in what he helped others carry, too. Recognition didn't come with applause. It didn't arrive in a press release or a glossy plaque. It came quietly, like most of Darius's victories. It started on a Tuesday. An envelope slipped under his office door. Handwritten. No company logo. No title. Just 5 words on the front. "For the one who stayed." Inside, a folded note. "You showed us what we forgot. Thank you." No signature. No name. Just truth. That same afternoon, he walked past the lunchroom and noticed something odd. People were waiting for him. Jesse, Kevin, Marta, a few interns, a few managers. They clapped softly, not for show, and someone had made a banner. "Thank you, Mr. Cole." In black marker, on printer paper, taped up unevenly. He stood there, unsure. Then someone handed him a cup of coffee. Not store-bought, homemade, in a mug that said, "Integrity doesn't wear a suit." He laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt real. Later that week, a quarterly town hall was held. Vanessa opened it with a simple sentence. "I'd like to begin by honoring someone who didn't just change this company, he reminded it what it was supposed to be." She turned to Darius, seated in the front row. The room rose. A standing ovation. No cue, no announcement, just human instinct. Darius stood, slowly, not to bask, just to acknowledge. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The room said it all. Recognition also came in small ways. The janitorial staff got a raise, the first in 11 years. A new wellness room was opened, named the Quiet Corner, after a phrase Darius used often. Employees began requesting walk-in talks with him, just to vent, just to learn. His inbox overflowed, not with problems, but with thank yous. One from a finance associate. "You made me realize my job isn't more important than anyone else's, just different." Another from the receptionist. "You gave me the courage to speak up." But one message hit different. It came in a letter, hand-delivered, from someone unexpected. "Gerald." It read, "I didn't see you before. That's on me. You made me face a part of myself I didn't want to look at. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just telling you I see it now. Thank you for not returning my disrespect with silence." It wasn't redemption, but it was real. Recognition wasn't always comfortable. Sometimes it made Darius feel exposed, like the world had turned toward him too quickly. But each day, he settled into it a little more, because it wasn't about him anymore. It was about the permission he gave others to show up fully, to be seen, to be valued, to be heard, even in a whisper. One day, A young woman knocked on his office door. She looked nervous, clutched a resume in her hands. I just wanted to say, she stammered, I applied here because of you. He blinked. Me? She nodded. I saw the video. My dad's a cleaner. He cried watching it. Said, that man speaks for people like me. Darius stood up, shook her hand. Then let's make sure you speak for others, too. Recognition found its way into the walls. The art in the building began to change. Old oil portraits were replaced with photos of employees, candid, beautiful human. One showed Darius wiping down a hallway while smiling at a passing intern. Another, him sitting on a bench, head back, laughing in the sun. It wasn't about idolizing him. It was about telling the truth. And then came the moment he didn't expect. Vanessa invited him to a private lunch. No assistants, no cameras, just them. She handed him a small box. Inside, a frame, a photo of them from the press conference handshake. Below it, a quote, "Respect is remembering what you owe and repaying it in full." She looked at him, tears in her eyes. I was raised by a hero and I forgot. You reminded me. He didn't respond right away. Then he said gently, you reminded yourself. Recognition doesn't erase the past, but it honors it. It says, I see you now, and I should have seen you then. And for Darius, that was enough. It started with a knock, soft, hesitant, at Darius's office door. A boy, maybe 12, stood there with his mother. She wore a custodial uniform. Her eyes were tired, kind, and full of apology. I hope this is okay, she said. He wanted to meet you. Said, you're the reason I didn't quit. Darius stood up, smiled gently. It's more than okay. Come in. They sat down. The boy's name was Jamal. He had a notebook tucked under his arm, worn at the edges. He pulled it out and flipped to a page. I wrote this for school, he said, voice quiet. We had to write about someone who changed the world. Darius blinked slowly. You picked me? Jamal nodded. My mom said you saved the CEO, but I think you saved more than that. You made people act right. Darius chuckled softly. Well, he said, maybe I just reminded them how. That afternoon, after they left, Darius sat for a long time with that notebook page in his hands. It had a drawing at the top, a stick figure with a mop in one hand and a cape on his back. Under it, Mr. Darius, the man who cleaned up more than floors. Legacy, it turned out, wasn't about history. It was about seeds, things you plant without knowing who will harvest them. Weeks passed. The culture council grew stronger. Employees began mentoring each other. Not officially, organically. People across departments started leaving handwritten notes for their cleaners, their drivers, the temp staff. Thank yous, jokes, drawings, humanity. One day, Darius found a folded napkin in the break room with scribbled words. Your dignity made me find mine. He didn't know who wrote it, but he pinned it on his wall like a medal. Vanessa, too, had shifted. Not just her leadership style, her presence. She took more walks through the building, stayed longer in conversations, began holding story hours where anyone could come and share something personal. It was awkward at first, but when Darius showed up and told the story of how he once froze during a fire call and was still learning to forgive himself, the room changed. People cried. People healed. The board had changed too. Gerald stepped down quietly, not disgraced, just done. Maybe this place needs something I can't give, he said in his final meeting. And maybe that's a good thing. Months later, Darius stood outside a small community center. It was opening day. A new program had launched, funded quietly by Hale Tech, offering mentorship, life skills, and emotional support for janitorial and service workers across the city. Its name? The Quiet Backbone Project. He didn't want it named after him, but the tagline was his. Because everyone deserves to be seen. On the first day, a woman approached him. I heard about you from my niece, she said. She works in tech. Told me your story. I'm not here to mentor or learn. I just wanted to say, I mattered today, for the first time in years. Darius shook her hand. You always did. That evening, he walked home under a sky painted gold and gray, that late day kind of light that made everything feel like memory. He passed a corner store. An older man outside said, "You're that guy, right?" Darius paused. "Which guy?" "The one who made that company see itself." Darius smiled. "Maybe." The man nodded. "Keep doing that." Back at home, Darius placed Jamal's notebook page in a frame. Next to it, the old bracelet. On the shelf, the shoebox was gone. He didn't need to keep the past locked anymore. Now it lived out in the open, surrounded by stories, and passed forward with care. Because legacy isn't a statue, it's a conversation. A hand extended, a truth remembered, a child watching. The story didn't end at Hale Tech's glass doors. It spilled into the streets, into classrooms, into living rooms and lunch breaks, into churches and college lectures and subway cars, into the minds of anyone who had ever felt invisible. A high school in Atlanta added Darius's story to its social justice curriculum. A janitorial union in Milwaukee quoted him in their mission statement. Truth shows up eventually. A hospital nurse in Sao Paulo translated his press conference into Portuguese and played it for her coworkers after a night shift. "I cried," she wrote, "because we clean blood off floors too." The video of his town hall moment was subtitled in 6 languages. One clip made it onto a subway ad in Seoul. Another opened a conference in Johannesburg, rebuilding corporate culture the Darius way. And back in Chicago, Darius kept walking the same halls, kept showing up early, kept listening. But now people listen back. One Monday morning, he received a letter with a Kenyan postmark. The return address simply read, "To Mr. Darius, you spoke for me." Inside was a drawing. A cleaner in overalls, standing taller than a skyscraper. At the bottom, "I've worked 34 years and never heard my name spoken with respect. Until I heard yours." Even corporations started taking notes. One company launched an initiative, Name Your Backbones. They asked employees to submit the names of under-recognized staff who made the place run. Thousands of names flooded in, and at the top of the memo, Darius's photo. But it wasn't all perfect. Critics emerged. One op-ed read, "Heroism is not a job qualification." Another, "We're turning janitors into moral compasses. What does that say about leadership?" Darius never responded. But Vanessa did at a leadership summit. "If the people we pay the least show the most integrity, maybe we're measuring the wrong things." Mic dropped. The Hale Tech story became case study material. At Harvard Business School, at Spelman, at Stanford, one professor called it the single most moving demonstration of restorative leadership in modern corporate history. Darius shook his head when he heard that. "I was just doing my job," he said, but even he knew by now, his job had redefined what a job could be. Then came the mural, unannounced, painted overnight on a brick wall across from the Hale Tech campus. It showed Darius holding a mop in one hand and a light in the other. Underneath, "Let the ones who keep the floor clean teach us how to stand." It became a landmark, a meeting point, a selfie spot, a symbol. One day, Layla sent him a video. A college student in Spain was giving a talk on humility and mentioned a janitor in Chicago who taught an entire company how to see. Her closing slide? A photo of Darius and Vanessa shaking hands. Darius watched the video 5 times. Not for vanity, for the sheer strangeness of seeing his once silent life become language for others. But the moment that broke him? It came in the mail. A worn-out business card taped to a postcard. No return address. Just a note. "You saved my daughter's life in '98. I didn't make it, but you did. And you raised the kind of man the world needed. From somewhere beyond the wreckage, thank you." His hands shook. He placed the card gently beside the bracelet, and wept not out of grief, out of completion. The story was never meant to be global. It was meant to be a moment. But when truth is lived quietly and consistently, the world amplifies it for you. And so it did. The last moment didn't come with fanfare. No cameras, no speeches, no spotlight, just a knock at Darius's door on a quiet, gray Friday afternoon. He opened it to find a little girl, no more than 8, standing beside her father. The man was wearing an overnight janitor uniform, eyes tired but smiling. The girl held out a folded piece of paper. My dad says you changed everything, she whispered. So, I drew you how I see you. Darius knelt down, unfolded the paper slowly. It was a crayon drawing. Him, in a janitor's jumpsuit, a heart on the chest, a crown on his head, 100 little people behind him, each holding a broom, a book, or a light. Underneath, in wobbly handwriting, Mr. Darius, the man who made people remember. He smiled, and something in his chest cracked, open, soft, clean, final. He hugged her gently. You drew me just right. That night, he sat in his small living room. The radio played a little jazz, Coltrane, slow and aching. He looked around. One framed photo of Layla, one old bracelet, one notebook page from Jamal, and now one crayon drawing. He didn't need more. He had legacy in full color. Later, he went on a walk. Same neighborhood, same streets, but different now. A teen nodded at him and said, "Respect, OG." A barista stepped out and handed him tea. On us. Even the bus driver gave him a honk and a thumbs up. But Darius didn't soak in the attention. He let it pass through him, like wind through trees. He was a man who had lived quietly, fully, who had been ignored, then recognized, but who had never changed his compass. He just kept doing right, even when no one looked. Back home, he wrote a note. For himself. For someday. When you give dignity to others, you don't lose yours. You multiply it. He placed it in the drawer, right next to the folded memo they once used to fire him. Poetry in paper. The next morning, the sun rose soft and low. Darius opened his window. He heard laughter in the building. Not because of him, but because of what he helped build. And that's when he knew he didn't need to be remembered forever. He just needed people to remember how. 1 month later, he retired quietly. No big event. Just one last walk through the halls. He left a note in every department. 3 words. Keep seeing people. Years passed. Hale Tech thrived, not just in revenue, in trust, in respect, in soul. And sometimes, new hires would pass a photo in the hallway, a man in blue, holding a mop and a smile. They'd ask, "Who's that?" And someone would always say, "That's Darius Cole. He taught this place how to care." And in one small school in Bronzeville, a little girl stood up during career day. She held a picture she drew herself. It showed a man standing on a ladder, cleaning a light bulb high above a crowd. "I want to be like him," she said. He didn't just clean floors. He lit the building up. And with that, the story ends the way all true ones should. Not with a bang, but with a hand reaching out, a child watching closely, and a quiet voice in the background whispering, "Thank you for seeing me." He didn't leave behind a legacy of noise. He left behind a legacy of light.